This is going to be about intermediate to advanced color grading. It's going to be all in DaVinci Resolve, but some of the theory ideas can go to Premiere if you're going to use that, or if you're using Final Cut, but mostly DaVinci. So a little bit about myself. Like it was introduced, I'm at Macalester College. I'm the multimedia producer. This is my first symposium, and it's been amazing so far. I'm kind of a video first, photo second. So at my school, I'm the only person doing media. So I do both, but video's always kind of been my forefront. And then I really love DaVinci Resolve, and I'm so happy that I've been hearing more about it, and people are kind of getting excited about it. So before we get started on the actual DaVinci Resolve stuff, we'll go over some quick tips that are just good to know for color grading in general. A big thing is knowing your footage. If you don't know where your footage came from, it's hard to set up the right color pathway to get the most out of it. So you want to know if you shot on a Blackmagic camera and you have B-RAW, or if you shot in Sony and you have S-Log or Panasonic V-Log, or sometimes you get it straight from an iPhone and it's already Rec 709, so you got to work with a limited color space there. Then you also want to know your output destination, because different destinations are going to use standard dynamic range. Maybe they use HDR, maybe it's using ACEs. Depending on the level of the project, that'll change the way you set things up. And then one of my biggest things is calibrate your monitor, because if you're looking at an uncalibrated monitor, you're looking at colors that you don't know if they're accurate or not. Your whites could be off balance, and then you might adjust it based on how your computer looks, and then when someone views it, it could look like yellow, it could look blue. Just make sure that you're kind of locked in there. You can get calibration tools pretty cheap. It's like $100. You can use it on any monitor. You can buy a color grading monitor, and usually they come kind of factory calibrated. But again, you'd still want to adjust for the room that you're in. Yeah.
Do you have a calibrator you like or recommend?
I use I think it's called the Spider X Pro, I want to say. I think it's like $100. It's pretty solid. There are better ones. I think Kalman makes really nice ones. Bumps up like another $100, but it's solid. It gets the job done, especially if you have a cheaper monitor and you can't convince your school to get a nice color grading monitor. That'll help you out a lot. And then use your waveforms, your vector scopes, your kind of mathematical data sets that you can look at and know exactly where things are at. It might look a little overexposed on your computer screen, but if your waveforms are saying you're good, you're good. So really use that to your advantage. All right, so why should you use DaVinci Resolve, and why I use DaVinci Resolve? DaVinci started as just a focused color software. It actually started as a hardware company way back when everyone was using film, and it used to be $100K to get it into your creative studio or into your Hollywood studio. But it's come down a lot in price, and now it's accessible by everyone. It uses nodes versus layers. I know a lot of people are used to layers like Photoshop or adjustment layers in Premiere Pro. The setup is a little different, but it allows you more creative control, and it allows you to kind of go a little more granular if you want to. You can still use Premiere. You can do an XML export that basically sends out your file as a base timeline that you can pull into Premiere or into Resolve, and then you can color, send it back out, export with Premiere. It's a one-time payment. I know that's really exciting. I hate the cloud-based stuff where it's monthly payments. And the free version is really good. I think this was talked about a little bit in the audio workshop, if some of you were there. Some things aren't in it, but if you want to just get a feel for it and see what the program is like, what it's like to color in there, what node-based coloring is like, it's great. It's also great for students. I'm a big believer in giving students tools that they'll use in the actual world, and Resolve is a professional coloring software, so if they're interested in becoming a colorist or working on high production stuff, this is a great tool to learn and have them learn in a safe environment where it's okay if they make mistakes. So the first thing is being color space aware. When you set up a project, you want to make sure that it's set up for your coloring. Our timeline color space and our output color space are going to be different, just like our input color space is different. Your input is whatever camera you're coming from. So maybe that's S-Log, maybe that's V-Log, maybe it's red raw. It could be a variety of things. And I know, at least for me, a lot of times the projects I work on have multiple color spaces. So maybe we have someone who's shooting in like DC, and they're sending me like Canon raw footage, and I'm shooting some of it up here or up in Minnesota, and it's V-Log. Using something like DaVinci Wide Gamut will allow you to have a common color space, so the adjustments that you're making are going to be the same for each clips, and it just kind of sets everything up for success, so you have it all kind of laid out the same way, and you can copy and paste things over and they'll react the same way. So this is kind of like the color space pathway. So we start with our input color space here, and then that's going to be, like I said, whatever your camera is. We go to our timeline color space, which is, I would recommend DaVinci Wide Gamut. If you're using just one camera, it's all like S-Log, you can set it up like that. But I think DaVinci Wide Gamut, it's like an HDR color space. You have a ton of latitude to push and pull colors. So it's really nice for like a timeline color space. That's why Blackmagic made it. It's designed to just be timeline color space. And then you have your output. So output's going to be like Rec 709. Your DaVinci Wide Gamut, I have a little example here of like just how much color it holds. So like the blue line here, that's our ARRI Wide Gamut. So that's like industry standard. Hollywood used it all the time. The very outside triangle is going to be DaVinci Wide Gamut. So it can hold pretty much anything you hold at it, that you throw at it. It can hold ACES, P3, Rec 2020, it's got it all, and more. So you don't have to worry about your footage breaking or running into like a condensed color where you're getting some like artifacting or anything like that. It also works with the HDR tools in Resolve. So it works directly with the curves, the HDR wheels, the color warper. And these are tools that are designed to be in an HDR workflow. Like for your HDR wheels, you can adjust things based on stops. So if I want to like lower my highlights by one stop, I can just select -1 on that, and it'll drop it down by one stop, which is a nice way. I know a lot of like photographers use that. They think in stops. I go based on look mostly, but if you're interested in doing that, you have that option. So again, you want to monitor in your output color space. So on your screen, a lot of this is like very technical stuff, but if you can set up your monitor to look in Rec 709, that'll give you exactly the colors that you're going to output to. So some more expensive monitors will have Rec 709 options built in. I think the Asus ProArt displays, it's like, I think the HD ones start at like $200 and they go up from there. But they have like a Rec 709 option, and that's pretty much what everything uses. Like if you're uploading to the web, if you're uploading to YouTube, it's all going to be Rec 709, Instagram. Apple's weird. They use like, I think it's like Gamma 1.8, which is frustrating. I know a lot of people have probably dealt with like the export, my contrast looks totally different, what happened? And that's that like difference in the gamma. But if you can set it up to monitor in the way you're going to output the color space, it's going to help mitigate that a little bit. So we'll jump over here into DaVinci Resolve, and we'll make sure we're all set in the program. So can I get a show of hands who's used Resolve before? Okay, so we got about like 50-50 split. I'll do a quick once over of like the actual program. DaVinci Resolve, it has a bunch of different pages. So down here, we have our different pages. So like media ingesting, You have a cut page if you're doing like quick cuts or like selects from your footage. Edit page, that's where most of your edits are going to be made, and you get all of your audio. You have Fusion, that's going to be like After Effects. So that's like 3D effects, things like that. Our color page right here, which is what we're going to focus on. And then we also have Fairlight, that's like your audio. It was talked about a little bit in the audio session. And then your Deliver page, that's like Media Encoder. So selecting how you want to deliver it. There's like presets for YouTube, Vimeo, that sort of stuff. But we won't really go into that. We want to make sure our project here is set up for the footage that we have. We can go over here to our settings, to our color management, and we can select, it's in Rec 709 Scene. So that's their kind of automatic color space that they put it in. We want to have DaVinci Wide Gamut Intermediate for our timeline. So we have that latitude, that HDR color space. And then for our output, what we want to monitor in, because we will be seeing on screen as we make adjustments what it's going to look like in our output color space rather than our timeline color space. That's more like under the hood. We'll select Rec 709, Gamma 2.4. Let's pretend this is going on YouTube or something. Do you have a question?
For the color space, they say sometimes when it's a Mac, you use Rec 709A.
Yeah, so Rec 709A is like it's like a corrected version to kind of deal with that like Gamma 1.8 shift that Mac has. I try to just use Gamma 2.4 just because all of your media is going to be viewed on things like on a bunch of different screens. Like there is no way to get it perfect for everyone's screen. So like some people have Macs, some people have Windows, some people have Androids, some people have iPhone. So you can use Rec 709A if you want to target mostly Mac. Like if you know like the students at our school pretty much exclusively use Mac, you could do that and you could target for that. Rec 709 2.4 is more general. So if like you have a split, like a lot of people are walking around with like Windows PCs or Windows laptops, it can kind of like be a more general split between. And it's usually what you'll export for like, if anyone's doing like freelance gigs or stuff like that, it's more of like a standard, I think it came from like broadcast TV, what they would have to like set it to. So it's kind of become like an industry standard to select that. But yeah, you can kind of adjust based on what you have. Yeah.
Can you use Rec 709 for any kind of, if you're using V-Log or S-Log or C-Log, does it matter?
Yeah, so
The output?
no, you can use Rec 709 for anything. So basically it's just a different way to package up your color for delivery. It's kind of taking, so like C-Log or V-Log, that's going to be a pretty wide color space. You're going to have a lot of information there. Rec 709 is going to compress it down into a much more playback-friendly color space for pretty much any device. And that's why we want to monitor in Rec 709. So we see like, okay, like the highlights they're really like dying right now. I'm super burned out up there. So we got to like pull it back. But yeah, you can use, it works for anything. Unless you're doing something like an ACES workflow, but that's more like, that's really intense stuff. Okay, so we're set here. We'll save that. And now we know we got our timeline color space is set, our output color space is set, and we can actually jump into the color page here. All right, so something that I really love about DaVinci Resolve is the ability to use Powergrades. And you can think of a Powergrade as kind of just like a saved collection of nodes. It's kind of like a preset, kind of like a LUT, but it gives you the ability to drag and drop, so you can just like save it, pull it over, it's right there. And it gives you a consistent workflow. So I'll pull one over. I have one set here. So we'll pull this away. This is going to be our nodes area where all of the nodes that we have are going to kind of show up. You can see we got nothing. This is B-raw footage from the Ursa 12K. We can just drag and drop. And so this is like what a Powergrade is. It's just a collection of these nodes here. And so you can make it as intense or as simple as you want. It's really whatever works for your workflow. And it's designed to be kind of a general catch-all. So you can put it on any footage, and you can, like, let's say I don't need to work with contrast on this. I can turn contrast off, and I don't have to use it. It's not going to pull anything from that. I will always use contrast, but you know, I have a bunch down here you can see on the bottom that are off by preset, like automatically, and those are more creative decisions that I can make. If I want to use some plugins, or if I want to add grain or some glow to this, I can do that, but it's not automatically applied. So this also, while it helps me keep a consistent workflow and kind of like, okay, first I do my balance and my exposure, next I'm doing my contrast, then I'm doing my saturation. It also helps with time efficiency. You can set up a power grade to be like a fully graded look, and you can just like drop that on your footage. If you got a quick turnaround, but you still want to shoot and log, you can drop it on and you can just make quick adjustments and then send it out. It doesn't have to be a really like robust and time-intensive workflow. It can be quick. And it also lets you kind of like preset things like on and off testing.
So, but initially, like, you made that power grade.
Yeah, so what I did, there's a YouTube channel called Darren Mostyn. He's a colorist in the UK, does stuff for like BBC. You can download a preset power grade, and I can make this one available to anyone who wants it. But I kind of took his, and then I made it my own, adjusted things, took some stuff out, added things that I have that I like to use. So it's really meant to be customized to what your needs are for what you're doing. And we can easy on and off testing, like let's say I wanted to have like glow on this. Let me pull up my effects here. I can add glow pretty easily. We'll make my shine threshold lower so it's visible here. And I can like, oh, do I like that? Do I not like that? I think I'm going to leave it off. But you can do that test really quickly, and you can have that all set up for you with a power grade. So like these are the things that I usually use and might want on these projects. If I'm going too fast, let me know. It's a lot of stuff. Okay, so we have our power grade on there, and we're ready to start actually coloring what we got. We're going to use the HDR wheels, that high dynamic range color wheels, because we're working in DaVinci wide gamut. So that's going to work directly with the color space that we're in. And it also gives us some more tools and some more control over what we're doing. So I'll jump to my balance and my exposure here, and we'll just totally reset this. And go here, totally reset that. This little guy here with the full circle with the plus in the middle will reset the entire kind of tool that you're using. So we're using our HDR. Something cool about the HDR wheels is you can preview what like your shadows are showing. So if I press this little button here, that'll give me a preview. So that's what's in my shadows. I can adjust the fall off of what's in my shadows and make that a little smoother, or I can make it a little bit harsher and select more. It's kind of up to you to decide that, but that's a nice tool so you can preview, is this going to affect this part of my image? And you can make sure that you're only working in, like maybe it's, I only want to work in my highlights. In this clip, there's like nothing there. And I can see like, okay, if I try to do stuff in my highlights, I'm not going to have anything happen, but I can work in my lights. So you can make adjustments. Like I said, you can like, maybe I want to lower the shadows by 1 stop. I can type in -1 on the exposure. It's going to drop it down. That looks a little intense for me, so we're going to bring it back up. And maybe we'll leave it there, and we'll bring up our light exposure a little bit. And we can use this tool here, the waveform, to kind of see where our shadows and highlights are sitting. We're not clipping in the shadows. You can see we got a little bit of space there, but we're close. If you want a more like movie look, you usually keep stuff below like 700 IRE, that kind of point for like your highlights. If you're doing light bright, just don't blow out your highlights and you should be fine. We'll keep it looking right there. I'm also going to get rid of my gallery here. That's kind of where my power nodes live. So this tool right here, you can select it on and off. And then I got my node trees right here. And now we can kind of see our clip a little bit better. We'll get rid of our clips here too. Now we got a nice big workspace. Yeah, so if you, this is called a qualifier tool. So you can like hover over and it'll show you like where in your image this is living in your waveforms, like where the colors are split into RGB. So you can kind of get an idea of like where things are. Like where are my skin tones? I want to know how bright those are. Yeah.
Quick question. When you say if you're not using like a color grading monitor, you're just using your laptop screen.
Yeah.
Where do you kind of keep your brightness at on your computer to kind
Yes.
of keep it true?
So newer Macs have a BT709 color space that you can select in like your monitoring settings. I would recommend that. If you're in a really bright environment, you kind of just gotta roll the dice and like set it to whatever like works for you. If possible, try to color grade and edit in like a darker environment. Get like a little desk lamp so you're not like hurting your eyes. But Macs are tough, and you can try and color calibrate a Mac too if you get one of those color calibrators, the on-screen ones. But yeah, I would recommend that as like a first step.
So how would the color calibrator interact with the Mac settings? Would you put it on that 709 setting first and then do a calibration?
Yep, so these tools usually have like a way to kind of like interface with your computer, and it'll be like, okay, set your screen to like, if possible, like it usually says like 6500 Kelvin for your color temp, and then you'll go through like, I want it to be Rec 709, and it'll flash a bunch of lights, and it'll like calibrate it for you, and then it'll kind of set it up for you. It's all within the software that comes with these tools. But it's just like, can you install software on your work computer or not? You have to go to ITS, maybe, I don't know. Depends on your university. Okay, yeah, so we got our HDR wheels there. You also get, with HDR wheels, you get more options here. I got specular highlights, so it's like the brightest parts, but we can tell from our waveform that we don't have anything up there. I got my highlights, so if I bump this up, or I bump my lights up a lot, we'll see if we can get anything up into there. So we're getting a little bit now that it's bright enough. We got a little bit in our highlights. We'll take that off. And then you also have more tools as you get towards like your darker areas. You have just pure black, you have darks, and you have shadows, versus in primaries, you got lift, gamma, gain. So that's like dark, midtones, highlights. So it gives you a lot more flexibility to kind of work with the HDR wheels. All right, let's talk about some nodes now. There's more than two types of nodes, but we'll talk about two types of nodes. We're going to talk about serial nodes versus parallel nodes. How are we doing on time? Okay. So serial nodes, you can think of those more like your layers, if you're like layering adjustment layers in Premiere. It's going one on top of the other. Like node 3 here, that's pulling the image from node 2. Node 2 is pulling the image from node 1. So adjustments I make on node 1 are going to be on node 2, and whatever I'm adjusting on node 2 is going to like pull off of that. Parallel nodes work a little differently. So basically, both of these nodes, 2 and 3, are pulling from node 1. And that allows you to have a little more flexibility. Like let's say if you want to adjust saturation in a different color space. So HSV is another color space you can use, and that adjusts more like color density rather than saturation. And saturation can kind of introduce unwanted exposure changes in your image, so it can make like colors brighter. If you want to just make it denser and richer, like if you watch a TV show and you see like, wow, that guy's sweater is a really like deep shade of like dense red, you can get towards that with color density. And so like a parallel mixer node, that'll allow you to both have saturation and HSV, and then it's combined equally into your end one. So it's not stacking on each other. For people who have done like film photography in a darkroom, dodging and burning, you can do this with like power windows, is what they're called. You can think of it as like a mask. And if you're stacking them one after another, you can end up with some hot spots if they overlap. If you do it in parallel, you're getting more of like a smooth collection of it all put together. So let's look at some examples. So here we have how I like to set up my saturation. So if I click here and I look here, my saturation is at 30. Default, it's set to 50. So it's lowered quite a bit, but we still have some like good color in there. That's because I also have HSV, which is a different color space set up to kind of work with this image in this power grade. If you want to use HSV, it's pretty easy to select. Right-click your node, go down to color space, and then it's right there. And you can see you got a long list of color spaces. These are all the color spaces that Resolve has kind of automatically in. It can pretty much take anything from any camera. And then it has more, like HSV. And this just kind of resets, remaps where the RGB is. Normally you're working RGB, red, green, blue. HSV is a little different and resets where these are. So our green is going to affect our saturation here. And you can look at my waveforms, it's hardly moving at all, and I'm really cranking it up. So I'm not introducing much exposure change, but I am introducing a lot of saturation and a lot of density to these colors. They're nice and rich. And it's just, ever since I learned about it, it's been like kind of a game changer. I don't do anything just plain saturation anymore. I always use HSV. Yeah.
Can you kind of explain the difference between lift, gamma, gain, and offset?
Yeah, so lift is like your shadows. So if you're working outside of HDR, like let's say you got to rework a video that was made in the past. I know that happens to me all the time. They're like, oh, we want to redo this video, just use these clips. You're going to be working in Rec. 709, which is standard definition. You won't have all the space to use HDR. Lift, gamma, gain is meant for that. So lift is your shadows. Gamma is your midtones, so think like skins, where the skins are sitting. And then your gain is going to be like your highlights. And it's wider. Like we can see like, okay, I can adjust my oh, well, I can't do it in the HSV, but I can do it here. I can adjust my highlights here. I can adjust my shadows here. And then my midtones are right here. And you can also make color adjustments with that. Like I want my highlights to be green. I can do something crazy like that. I want my shadows, like you want to do the teal and orange look, we can do that. Now we got like our teal and orange look. If you want to be Michael Bay, it's on. More power to you. Yeah, so that's kind of where that's sitting. And a lot of tools, or a lot of like contrast. There's a million ways to do things in Resolve. Like the things I'm teaching are by no means the only way to do it. You can adjust contrast in a bunch of different ways. I got a contrast slider here, but I could go into my curves and I could do like a nice little S curve if I want to adjust it like this. If I come from photo, I'm more used to that. You can do that. So there's a lot of ways to kind of do everything within Resolve. This is just kind of like what I do. Yeah.
So if you don't put it in a parallel node, the HSV, it won't work like that as far as like the saturation and do something different?
It'll still work the same way, but it'll pull from the node before it. So it'll have that saturation before it. It'll pull it and add on to it. So HSV can get kind of funky, especially with like blues. If anyone's like school colors are blue, it can really get weird with blues if you push it far. So like if you're like really cranking it up, and you already got saturation in, it's just gonna like break your image sooner. This gives you, I've found, like finer control over mixing those together, because sometimes I do want some regular saturation in there because it reacts differently with the colors, and maybe I've got blue and I want to kind of pump it up a little bit without it being like crazy. I can do that. Or I could change this saturation and I could go like into my curves and I want to do direct color, like hue versus saturation selection here, and I just want to affect like my greens. So I can select my greens here and I can adjust those on their own with just regular saturation, or like if I had blue in this image, I could do that. And then it's combined back in and kind of gives like an even combination of both.
I was going to ask, is it the average of the two?
Kind of, yeah. I don't know the exact math because you can add a bunch of different nodes. Like I've got a bunch of power windows here. So like let's say we'll jump to a nice spot in my clip here. Let's turn these on here. So these are like different like power windows, so masks that you could say are on my image. I can turn them on and off here. Let's reset this a little bit. Lower that down so we're not as crazy. Okay. So if I want to have like power windows that interact with each other and like pull from my image, I can set it up to do that in here. And they're gonna like combine together, but it's gonna, you can kind of think of it as like an equal sum of all of them together, I guess is a good way to think about it. That's kind of how I think about it. Yes.
There's like, let's say one has exposure of 1 and one has exposure of 0.5, do they meet like halfway? Like is there
Yeah.
conflicting information?
Yeah, I can do an example here. That's nice to see. So if I want to do add node, I can add a parallel node, and let's say I set this to saturation being 0, totally 0, right? So we're black and white, and no matter what I do on this, on like a node after this one, so this is my mixer here. So this is the guy that like combines both of them together. If I add another node here, and then I try to like, okay, let me increase my saturation. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to add any color back because I'm pulling from 0 color. There's nothing there for me to adjust. Now, if on this next node I go saturation at 100, it's going to bring me back to 50. So that's like it combining those two, and it's giving you like a kind of an equal sum of those. This is kind of like the best way I've seen to kind of explain it visually. Let's
If
reset
you've gone
that.
into playing with the mixer node, could have used it like, I want 75%.
I haven't messed with that. Maybe we can try it. Let's find out. I don't know if you can make adjustments on your mixer node and have them. Yeah, so it's not giving me anything. So mixer node is just there to combine things together, not to make adjustments. So we'll get rid of this guy. Okay, so that's kind of serial versus parallel. If you have more questions about it, because it is pretty kind of intense stuff and really has a lot of nuance to it, let me know and I can talk about it.
What's the difference between the green and the blue?
So the green is like your image. The blue is your alpha channel. So if you're doing like keying or like green screen keying, you can select your alpha channel to do like a green key, like Ultimate, I think is the premier one to do an alpha out. We'll jump to the next. Okay, we kind of talked about HSV and saturation. Yes?
So hopefully super quick question. Could you give 1 or 2 more examples about like of why you would want to split to do parallel nodes like you did saturation and HSV? What are some other scenarios that you can think of that would be
Yeah.
useful for you?
So if you're doing, like in the Powergrades, like I said, like that kind of dodge and burn, that can be useful there. Really, you can think of it as like anything where you don't want these two nodes to like layer onto each other. So sometimes with like hue versus hue adjustments, like I'm adjusting this green to be more yellow, and I want to adjust my yellows to be more orange. Like maybe I'm going for that classic fall look. Let's make every green tree look like it's fall and beautiful. I don't want to have my greens that I change yellow to then change orange too. I want to have some variance in there. So then if I do in parallel, it would be like changing to yellow, and then that same yellow that it changed to is then getting adjusted again by that next hue adjustment, versus pulling that green, changing it to yellow, pulling those yellows, changing it to orange, combined together, we get yellow and orange.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. And there are many other ways. I'm sure there are ways that I don't know about. You could figure things out. It's kind of just a nice tool to know about. All right, so let's go to skin tones. Skin tones are like That's like the base of your image. If you got people in your image and your skin tones look wrong, people are going to automatically know. We're like humans are like designed to recognize people. We're designed to recognize faces. I mean, Uncanny Valley is a thing for a reason. The Polar Express is terrifying for a reason. It's because it just doesn't look right. If your skin tones are wrong, your image just isn't going to look right. So Resolve has some good tools for focusing on skin tones. Your vector scope, which is similar to your waveform. It's another kind of way to look at your image. Has an option, if we go to this little drop down, I can have a skin tone indicator. So that's this little line right here between red and yellow. That will work for any color skin tone. I don't know how the math works, but it all lines up. If you get your skin tones on this line, you can know that they're right. Like mathematically, it's correct. Yes?
It's actually very simple because everybody's skin tone is tinted because of blood.
There we go.
Everybody's red.
There we go. So there's our answer. Thank you. So yeah, you can make sure your skin tones are in the right place. At least if you want to start. If you want to, make someone's skin blue because you got an alien character or something, you can do that. But you can know you're starting from the right place. And that's this little gray line under the vector scope. It's not in any of the other tools like the waveform, but you can kind of just do a quick check there. So you can color correct just for skin tones, and you can do global adjustments, or you can also use qualifiers to adjust your skin tones. So maybe let's go to my curves here, and we're just going to use that. And I'm going to go to this little eyedropper here. That's my qualifier. So it's similar to like other qualifiers or like a color picker. You're going to select something, and it's going to select that color. So if I select this skin, it's going to set up, okay, this is our like hue that we're kind of pulling from, our saturations here, luminance here, and you can adjust these. Like, I don't need any green in this, but it's hard to know what you're choosing if you're not seeing an example of like what it's picking. So if you hit Shift H, that's going to highlight just what your qualifier is choosing. So now I can kind of come in here and I can dial in my skin tones. Okay, we don't really want these like pinks. Sometimes it's tough. You gotta, kind of adjust where things are. And it's not always going to give you a perfect selection. I'm not going to spend too much time messing with it. You have these other kind of like matte finesse tools, like a pre-filter. I can clean up some of the darker areas with clean black. I can clean up some of the lighter areas with clean white. And that's clean white will work within what you're selecting. Clean black is going to work with what's outside of the selection. And we can kind of finesse it a little bit. If you're doing actual work, please make it better than this. But for this reason, we're just gonna we're gonna move forward with it. And let's say okay, let's see if this will work here. You can sometimes, with my mouse on my computer, I can zoom into my vector scope and really blow it up. I haven't been able to do that with my trackpad. But you can kind of see we're sitting a little more red-pink, but probably because we got this whole dress selected still. But a good portion of that is sitting on that vector scope skin tone indicator line here. We could also throw on a power window and just we're only gonna select here. And now we can see it's kind of faint, it's kind of hard to see, but we're sitting on that skin tone line and we can know all right, yes?
So does that track with the video though?
Yes, so this is up here just to kind of give me an idea of where my skin tones are. So I'm just isolating skin tones. These power windows can track, and the DaVinci tracker is amazing. Let me just do this. So let's say we want this here, and let's say I go into my HDRs. I want this. I want to bring the shadows up on this here, and we want to track it. Okay, I love this. This is exactly what I want. I can go to my tracker window here, which is this guy right here, and there's this arrow forward, arrow backwards. I can hit that, and it's going to start tracking forward and backwards. It's going to place automatically little tracking points, and it'll adjust. If you got some intense stuff going on, you can adjust like, okay, I don't want to track 3D. I don't want to track rotate. I just want to do pan tilt. So based on like how they're moving within your image, you can adjust that. And so I know like After Effects tracking, let's be honest, it's a pain in the ass. Setting up your tracking points, I got to do a null. I got to select the different points on my null, and I got to like pickwick it to like this thing, and it's a whole process. This is like, boom, we're done. So I love that. Yes.
Okay, I know I don't want to get too far off track with hardware, but what Mac is that? Is that an M1, M2, M3?
This is an M2 MacBook Pro. I think it has 16 gigs of RAM, so it's by no means like the top of the line. Like a Mac Studio will like crush this thing, but it does pretty well. And Resolve is pretty good. Yeah.
It runs really light compared to Adobe stuff.
Yeah, Adobe is really RAM intensive. Like it eats RAM for breakfast, and Macs are really expensive to get a lot of RAM in because Apple just kind of gatekeeps that. So it's hard to get 32 gigs of RAM. If you're working with Windows and you can do it yourself, 64 gigs of RAM, you're set, you're good. But Resolve is more CPU and GPU intensive, so it's lighter on RAM, and that's where it works really well with the M2 chips. Like Apple's silicon chips are really good, they're really efficient, and they're really powerful. So if you're working on Mac, one of the M chips, you can do most things. Like we're kind of getting into the weeds with some stuff and adding a lot of stuff on top of each other, but you can, yeah, they're really nice. Okay, so now I can like kind of pull this back through and I can see how it tracks. And it's pretty good for like not really fine tuning anything. It stretches a little bit, but you know, if you're doing something like for like work, you can adjust that. What do we got for time? Okay. Okay, all right, let's go into a little bonus thing. We're gonna talk about depth map. This is something that's new to Resolve within the I think the last 2 updates. Basically, the depth map, it kind of uses the neural engine that's like DaVinci's like built-in kind of like AI, but not as scary as like OpenAI. It's just like tools that are good to use. And it will kind of examine your image, and it will create basically a 3D plane of like your image. So you can, it'll say like, okay, these trees, they're farther back than this person. It'll create that Z-axis for you. So if I come here and I choose my depth map, I can add that onto here. This is more intense on your computer, so it takes a little while. Now we have like a 3D kind of key on my image, a 3D map, and it's adding different opacity to different layers back. So if I want to like add a certain color to like the front of my image, like just on the person, but I want to keep those trees more green, I can add a depth map onto it. Let me pull off this preview so we can actually see our image. And I can like say, okay, in my highlights, I want to like pull it more yellow here. What's going on here? Okay, there we go. Took a little second. So that's not adjusting those trees in the background. Like obviously this is really crazy, but it's going opacity based on that like amount of depth that you have in there. And this is great if you want to like, let's say you want to add a little like lens blur to a background. Like you're in a space, you don't have the exact perfect lens you want, or like you're not in like a big enough space to get the amount of compression that you want on your lens. You can use this to like add that in post. You don't want to be super heavy-handed with it. We'll do that quick. We'll reset kind of the HDR here. And we're going to use the alpha channel for this. So I'm going to create a new node. On Mac, it's Option S for a new serial node. And I'm just going to drag that up here. And this blue, I'm going to drag that in. So I'm pulling from the kind of alpha channel from this node 13. And then I'm going to go here and I'm going to select my Gaussian blur. You got a bunch of different ones, directional, lens blur. I'm just going to do this because it's quick and easy to kind of show. So now we're adjusting our kind of amount of blur based on that mask here that we have. And if I go back into here and I want to adjust kind of what I'm clicking on, like what I'm adjusting, I can use these like adjustment map kind of tools to like dial in exactly what I want to hit. So this is just going to hit her. So I'm just going to like, well, let's invert it. So we're just hitting the background here. So now we're just hitting the background. We're going to leave her alone. And we can turn this off. And now we're just hitting that background. This looks insane because we have it cranked up really high. But if you kind of feather that down and you have like finesse tools so you can like blur out the edges of your selection, and we can get a little bit of extra just like blur on our image in the background to just get a little softness. Okay.
Is it going to track the depth map, so if the person moves, they're not going to end up, moving through that blur?
So the depth map will work best with someone who's staying on the same z-axis plane. If they're moving forward and backwards, it's going to think that, okay, these are farther back in the image, so it's going to start adjusting the opacity of the like selection on them.
But if they're moving like
Side to side, you're good. It should be fine because it's just going based on that depth that it sees in the image. Yeah.
So, is the relight the same as the depth map?
It's similar. Relight is too intense for my computer to run. It's pretty heavy stuff, but it's really cool. So like Relight is great. Basically, it's a tool where it looks at your image and it creates a 3D map of your image, and then you can add like fake lights into there, and you can, as the name says, relight your image. So if I forgot to add a backlight or like a fill light to this side, I can re-add that in as either like a point source, as like a panel light. Like it's crazy what you can do. But I will say you can get close with just power windows and tracking them. You don't have, like Relight is a fun tool, but it's really, really intense on your computer. So if you can get away with just using power windows, do that. If you have to use Relight, use Relight. Maybe like you can like put it in there, you can export your clip and then bring it back in. So you can like actually have like playback, because I tried to do it on here earlier and I was getting like 1 frame per second on playback. So it's just like totally unusable.
Do you also have like render in timeline options, kind of like how Premiere does too? In
Yep.
Resolve, or?
Yep, I can go in here and I can be like in, out, and then in my delivery page, I can just choose render in and out.
Oh,
And
no,
so-
I mean like, cause like on the timeline sometimes like if I'm working like on a really slow computer, like in the timeline I'll render the effects. And
Yes,
stuff.
yeah. You can render within the timeline. You can like cache clips into your RAM.
It doesn't happen a lot, like, when like you make one adjustment and you can't watch anything?
Right.
That's only in Adobe.
Okay.
Yeah.
It doesn't really happen.
Okay.
And if you're running into issues, you can also go to your playback. You can go to your timeline proxy resolution, and you can put it up to full. That's probably where it'll start. And you can drop it down to quarter, especially with like, if you're using like 6K RAW or like 8K RAW from like a Red, you might want to drop that down. Or like ideally you're using proxies, just because that'll make life easier. But yeah, you have those same kind of tools to do that.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
This is more of me trying to wrap my mind around. So the Powergrades, that's what they're called?
Yes.
You can basically make one and then kind of like save it and then apply
Yes.
it to all of your custom assets.
Yep, so like let's say I really love this and I want to make a power grade of this. I can grab a still here and then, yeah, there is a lot going on here. And then, so like this is my still here, and I can export this. And if I will use like a DRX file, .drx, and then I can like go into a new project, I can drag that in, and then that'll be like, have all that node information in it, and I can just drop it on. So like that's how you would customize it. Yeah.
So at what point in your workflow are you doing your color corrections? Like,
So I like to do I'll do like my drag and drop power grade at the beginning, just so like I hate looking at log footage. It's hard for me. So I'll do that in the beginning, and then if you want to like if you have a clip where it's like just an interview and you're slicing it up a bunch, sometimes it's nice to do your color first, so you don't have to go back into all these different clips and adjust things, or like, because you can, like I can take this, I can copy it, and I can go to like this clip maybe, and I can hit Alt V or Option V, and I can paste attributes. So I can like, okay, I just want to paste my color correction onto this one, and it'll do that. Sometimes that's annoying to do when you have to like find a bunch of clips on a bunch of different layers, but there's like maybe titles mixed in and you don't want to select those. So in that case, you can do your color correction right away and then cut it up from there. But it isn't hard to like copy and paste and like move things across. You can also do it in like the color page with your clips. You can like append grade here or apply grade, and that can like pull from your clips and just add it to the other ones.
Yeah, the root of my question was, so you go through and you edit a video, and then they say, well, we want this one changed, this clip changes,
Yeah.
So, like instead of having, like I usually do the color correction, and when I say do the color correction, it's very minimal.
Yeah.
But I recently started a job where they have DaVinci. And
Yeah.
I just haven't opened it yet.
Yep.
Downloaded it, and so, but I want to.
Yeah.
So it's in my.
Yeah. If you're doing like revisions, or like you got to get it like checked by someone just for like the edit, I'll do like that. Drop in my like my base power grade, make sure it like looks decent. It's in like Rec 709, so then they can see it and it's not like log. And then I'll do my edit, send it to them, because I don't want to like do my whole color correction,
Right.
and then they're like, oh, we want to take these clips out. And that's a waste of my time. So then, then I'll do like a base one. They can make their choices, their edits on that, and then I'll go in once it's like picture locked, and I'll like really get in there.
Okay.
If there's time. You don't always have to do that. Yes.
So you do all your editing in Resolve.
Yes. So.
How might a workflow look so my campus were all Adobe.
Yep.
And so if I asked for this, it would be in addition to all that.
Yep.
How would the workflow go?
So you'd be using XMLs. So it's like a way to export your timeline. So the one thing to be careful with an XML is you don't want to add a bunch of like effects on there. So some of like the whip pan effects that are built into Premiere, they might not translate through to Resolve, and it'll just like it'll mess up your file and it'll give you like a weird message. I know.
Or like timer mapping, so does that translate over or no?
Some stuff does. I don't use Premiere, so I don't know exactly. It's gotten a lot better from 5 years ago when I was like first doing it. But yeah, so you'd use XMLs. I would do like your base cuts and like get your story locked, and then color it, and then you can send it back as like an XML file for like Premiere. Then you can bring it back in, and then you can kind of do any other like work that you got to do.
That's what I was wondering. So once you send it from Premiere to an XML file, then color it and send it back, do the Resolve color stick to it once
Yeah.
you put it back?
Yep.
It don't
So
matter what you put on it?
yep. So basically, when you're sending it back, you can like you're kind of sending like an exported file. So like send it back in like 4K. Always work in 4K or like whatever highest resolution you can. And you could use like you could send it back as like Apple ProRes file, so you have like a ton of information in there. But it's gonna keep that color grade in there.
So when you send it from Premiere to DaVinci, you can still stretch the clips out. So if you do it backwards, are you still able to pull the clips out, or it won't?
I think, so if I was gonna do time remapping, I would probably do that towards the end. Unless, I would do a test first, see if you can like do like a kind of like a time remap, send it to Resolve, see if it like translates over, because it might, because you can do like retime stuff in Resolve too.
Even not time remapping, just literally just stretching the clip out and making it longer.
Oh yeah. So if you
have to make sure you kept it in like your high frame rate. Like you wouldn't want that
well,
conformed before you.
I think it's just like if you have a clip, you have like you select this part of your clip, and then you want to add you want to add more of that clip back in there. I think it will work if you send it as like another timeline file, because it's just referring back to where that media is on your computer. It's not like an actual clip yet. Yeah. So yeah, once it's like yeah.
If you're gonna round trip, I think you might want to do color last.
Yeah.
But like the extra effects that you put on it, I still have to apply because it's still the base edit.
Yep.
Yeah, when we did it, we didn't bring it back into Premiere Pro because it was such a hassle.
Yeah.
It's like we would just finalize it in Resolve because it just there was no point really.
You can do like every effect in Premiere in Resolve that you'd want to do if you want to learn that. I think at that point you might as well just use Resolve. But and I think the XML workflow is a real pain a lot of times. Sometimes you have to do it, like if you're working with a client and they have someone who like edits and you're just coloring, and they might send you an XML. But if you can just work in DaVinci, I would recommend that.
There's also one thing I really like about Resolve is when you go to export, you can export your timeline as individual clips instead of just, even though we have like scene detect, auto cut and everything now, but that's super nice because you can rename them and have like naming conventions and bring those back into Premiere Pro if you want instead of like the XML round trip thing.
Yeah.
If you're working with a team, like you're doing the color grading on your footage, but the rest of the team is probably going to be doing some of the editing in terms of like clip selection, all that stuff. Could you just export like ProRes, do your color edit and Premiere on everything, export that in, into like a fully like Rec 709 color space, and then do all your Premiere edits using the new clips so that you're sharing those with the rest of the team?
Yeah, you could do that. Once you export, you will, like when you export a clip, you won't be able to like add more of that clip. Like if you, I have this. Like,
right, so if you just took all the footage.
Yeah, basically you're almost like transcoding it at that point, and you do all your color on that, you could totally do that. If you're working in a team, you can also, like if everyone's using Resolve, you can get like cloud editing, so you can all work on the same project together through like the DaVinci Resolve cloud. Which is cool. If you're working with like Premiere and then go into DaVinci and then back to Premiere, honestly, look it up on YouTube and you'll like find a million videos about how to exactly do it, and they'll for sure explain it better than I am right now.
Two-part question.
Yes.
I didn't see anything about Nikon's new log in the color space thing.
So that's probably going to come in like Resolve 19. So Resolve 19 is in beta right now. I don't use the betas because I use this for work and sometimes they have bugs. And once it drops, like for real, I'll switch over. And you get a ton of new tools in there. Like they probably will have the new Nikon log. And they'll do like periodic updates to make sure they have everything. They got a new tool where you can like extract just the drums from audio or just the voice or just like keyboard, whatever, guitar, I don't know. It's a cool one. And they add a bunch of stuff, but I don't have that yet just because I don't want to mess with any bugs that might come up. You had a question?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that, like, and I don't know, like, where you started with learning from this, but for our team, like, one of the best parts about DaVinci not only having like a free version of it to try it, is they offer so many like free courses on their website on like how to just start color grading with DaVinci.
Yep.
And like that's basically what I've done. Like I give my students or some of my like employees the time to just play around with that and like use those, and that's kind of how they learned it, just for starting grounds.
Yep.
And then we YouTube all the specific issues we run into.
Right. And like that, everything I did was a lot. You can go really simple, and you can just have one node. You can go to their LUTs. And let's say I want Blackmagic design because this is the Ursa camera, and I just want to go film Gen 5 to video. I can do that, and I can just leave it there. I don't have to do anything else. Basically, you can make it as intense as you want, and like if students are working with it, you can have like a really simple one for them to start with, and then maybe as they like get better with it and they get more comfortable with it, you introduce more tools like working with HDR, adding like depth map, or you know, working in HSV, extra color spaces, that sort of stuff. You can kind of like periodically add that in and like adjust maybe what their power grade looks like. Like, oh, this is our beginner one, this is our intermediate, this is our advanced. And you can kind of like tailor it to whatever you want, yeah.
Quick question, when you put the color space transfer in it, do you put it near the end or do you put it at the beginning?
Yes, so color space transform is always my first node, and then usually, a lot of times it's your last node too. So then you're working everything under that like DaVinci wide gamut. Some effects I like to do like after it in like Rec 709. Like, we didn't get to these. I have some helpful plugins. They're expensive, I know. I'm trying to get discount codes for the UPAA, and so I will let people know if you're interested. But these are really great, and I do these in Rec 709 afterwards. I use Dehancer and Shift. Shift is fantastic. If I have do I have a second here to quick do it?
You do have to roll, so.
All right. Let me just like Shift, boom, we'll drop that on. All right, and now I can like adjust my chroma, and I can add this like burn in here, and then suddenly we have this like distinct look that we didn't have before. And that's like 3 seconds. So you can do a lot. I'll end it there.
Thanks, John.